know this. Black Lives Matter protesters have continued to peacefully protest outside of Minneapolis's 4th Precinct Police Department. But at a press conference earlier today, Minneapolis Mayor Betsy Hodges and U.S. Representative Keith Ellison issued a call for protesters to leave the 4th Precinct, claiming that the area has become a hazard for the public. Mayor Hodges stressed that the city has met the demands of the Black Lives Matter protesters, including an independent investigation and the release of the names of the police officers who'd been involved. She also stated that police officers are now receiving daily threats, and 2 city council members criticized the protesters for what they called the occupation of the police station. And that's what Fox So-Called News will say is the real problem here, that protesters are being allowed to disrupt police business and that the police officers are in real danger. But that would completely ignore the fact that after a week of peaceful protests outside the precinct, a group of white supremacists opened fire on the protesters and injured 5 of them. The day after, Fox devoted fewer than 90 seconds of coverage to that mass shooting. And CNN and MSNBC each provided fewer than 15 minutes to cover the mass shootings over the course of the entire day. The shooters were not called terrorists. The incident didn't get much coverage. But all signs point to the fact that this was an act of terror carried out by white supremacists. So why didn't the mass shooting in Minneapolis last week get more coverage on the major networks? And why is the media so reluctant to call incidents like this what they are? Acts of terror carried out by American white supremacists. Here now to discuss how white supremacy is alive and well in America today and why the media won't cover it is Joe Madison, activist and host of The Joe Madison Show on Sirius XM, weekdays 6 to 10 a.m., and Hillary Shelton, director of the Washington Bureau and senior vice president for advocacy and policy for the NAACP. And Joe, Hillary,
thank you.
Great to have you guys both.
It's good to be back.
Yeah, thank you. Joe, your thoughts on this issue. Actually, let me expand this just a little bit. This just came out. 4 guys have been arrested. They're 23, 27, 21, and 26 years old. 3 are apparently Caucasian, 1 perhaps Asian. They were apprehended and charged in Hennepin County, Minnesota. The investigators have viewed the 4chan website email string, and these guys said that they were going to the BLM protest to, quote, stir things up and cause commotion, said feel free to carry. They also watched the video that Scarcella made. He's one of these, Alan Scarcella, he's the first guy that got arrested with an acquaintance in which they repeatedly used the N-word and urged viewers to stay white as they discussed their plans to disrupt the BLM protests. And then here's the thing that blows my mind that I'd love to hear from both of you on. Scarcella has been charged with 1 count of second-degree riot while armed and 5 counts of simple assault. And the other 3 defendants have been charged with second-degree riot. I find this astonishing.
It is astonishing.
This was attempted murder.
Well, yeah, and I don't.
And terrorism.
You're the only lawyer here, right? but the reality is, you don't need a law degree to understand that this that's the charge that it should be, which speaks to, number one, why more and more protesters, whether it's the Reverend Jesse Jackson, the NAACP, who's the executive director, president, just got arrested in Chicago, are calling for special prosecutors. Matter of fact, what you just read, people can go online. These dummies actually videotaped.
Oh, let me show you the video here, so our viewers know what we're talking about. I think do we have this cut? Yeah.
Yeah, there they are. There they are.
Yeah. I don't know if we've got audio.
Well, but they actually videotaped, and so it would appear to be a slam dunk here. But this is why I think that you're going to hear more and more calls for special prosecutors, because this is under prosecuting at the worst.
Yeah, and well, in fact, and Hillary, doesn't that, Joe's really good point that we need something other than the existing system.
Absolutely. It's failing us miserably. When we look at the examples, and more because of videos like this and because of telephone videos and other things, we're seeing just how awful this system is. Look, these are experiences the NAACP has been raising for a long time. We're a 106-year-old organization, after all.
You've been raising them for 106 years.
Thank you. It's been a problem for that long. Yeah. It's amazing the way it keeps evolving. As we talk about things today, what we're talking about on one side of the equation are those that are supposed to protect us from extremists along these lines that seem to be in too often in alliance with them. Don't get me wrong, many great police officers, thank God for them. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is two things that are problematic. One is that since Obama's come on, believe it or not, there has been an increase in hate crime and hate group reporting and hate group growing and experiences along those lines. What you're going to hear, and I'll be the first one to tell you this here today, once the Obama administration goes out, you're going to hear how many times more there have been assaults or attempted assaults on the president's life by the same kind of hate groups.
Yeah.
If you brought the Southern Poverty Law Center in to talk to you about the growth of hate groups, militia groups, and others in the country, what you'll see is a direct correlation to many of the old school hate groups as well. For instance, the organizations out of Mississippi, the White Citizens Councils, evolved to conservative citizens councils, moved from Mississippi to St. Louis, but then they began moving into the Tea Party. So we start seeing this expansion utilizing all kind of things, but it's still that extremist ideology, the kind of things we saw portrayed in a video just like this.
And you know what's really sad, we talked today about a study that was just completed where these groups are again attracting the least educated among the white demographics, the ones either with a high school education or less. That's nothing new. The other thing I think white America needs to understand, and even young African Americans need to understand, this is not new, as Hillary pointed out. The NAACP, one of their biggest campaigns was an anti-lynching bill that they couldn't get passed in Congress for years, and not for the effort of trying, for years. But what is new, and this is what people need to understand, video.
Absolutely.
That's what's new.
We have a disruptive technology here.
That's right. And that is what is exposing what has been going on in cities with rogue police departments, what's happening in Chicago, what happened in Minneapolis, what happened in Detroit. Imagine if you'd have had a camera in Detroit or Newark in the 60s, the way we have cameras now. It might have saved a lot of these cities from a long, hot summer.
Yeah, yeah, and it might have saved a lot of lives.
And it might have saved a lot of lives, including the lives of police officers who have to respond to rioters and that type of thing. In the Minneapolis situation, if I were one of the protesters, look, there's no way I'd leave. I'd camp out there. Look, didn't we just have, was it last summer or the summer before last, where people camped out in Wall Street?
That's right.
They did the same thing. And the reality is they're not interfering with police work. I think the biggest concern is that maybe the police might not be able to protect them from yahoos like we saw in that video.
Yeah, which is a legitimate concern.
Yes, that's a very legitimate concern, because Black Lives Matter, they've not harmed one person. Not one person have they harmed. Now, they may have disrupted some speeches, but they've not used violence in any of their protests.
Why do you both think that the press has been so reluctant to use the word terrorist here? It's seen, I mean, we're having the same debate with the abortion thing.
But this goes back to Oklahoma. This goes back to Oklahoma. That was a terrorist act.
Right.
I mean, you know, look who runs the newsrooms. Yeah. I mean, you know, maybe there's this embarrassment that goes on. You know, African Americans, it's funny, at least I don't know about your household, but when we see something happen and it's in the news, most African American families go, oh, I hope he's not black. Oh, you know, and I think that that's right. That's right, because it's collective guilt.
Well, it is. It's that, but it's also how authorities respond to it.
Right.
When Timothy McVeigh blew up the Murrah building in Oklahoma City, I was listening to some of the newscasters ramble on. They have to fill time and space because it's live. They're waiting for the next part of the story to unfold. They started throwing out all kind of names of who could possibly be responsible for blowing up this building, killing all the children in the daycare center, not to mention all the government workers in the building. Well, one of the names that came out immediately was the Nation of Islam, which had absolutely nothing to do with it whatsoever. But as the reporter was trying to come up with things, the newscaster was trying to find ways to fill the space. He threw out things along those lines. Now, that's a struggling reality for us in our communities.
We've been demonized so long in the news media that I think it's just now second nature by many of these news directors who really ought to know better and ought to instruct their reporters not to demonize us. But it's part of the culture.
Yeah. It's an easy shot. Look, there's so many stories we could go through about what happened when somebody decided to throw out, I believe the assailant was African American. Martial law being declared across places in Boston, Massachusetts, and other cities across the country because of one incident that happened and someone threw the name out, even though it was found later to be untrue. That was the response we got. There's a fear oftentimes in our communities by calling authorities to come in, because the fear is we're calling to come in and help because maybe this kid we know is a little unsettled, and somebody might be able to settle him down.
And you know the cops are not going to spend 4 hours talking him down like they just did this guy.
Well, that's absolutely. Remember the zebra case, what was the zebra case? They were looking for a light-skinned African American that could have literally been millions of African Americans. There's always this collective false charge.
Yep, there you go. More of tonight's panel on race in America right after this break. Welcome back to the big picture. Earlier today, a judge set bail at $1.5 million for the Chicago police officer who shot and killed 17-year-old Laquan McDonald 16 times last October as the teen walked away from the police. Officer Jason Van Dyke faces first-degree murder charges for the shooting, which was captured on a police dash cam and released for the first time to the public last week. It's sickening that an officer would shoot a teen 16 times as he walks away, especially since 13 of the shots were fired after McDonald was already on the ground. But the bigger issue here is, why did it take so long for this video to surface? And why does the official police report paint a very different sequence of events from the video? Jason Van Dyke is facing charges. But what about all the other officers who turned a blind eye and went along with a completely fraudulent story, apparently just to protect Van Dyke and the reputation of the force? Let's ask Joe Madison and Hillary Shelton. Joe, your thoughts on justice in the context of Jason Van Dyke?
Justice delayed is justice denied. This is too little, too late. And I thought about it coming over here knowing we were going to talk about this. We are lucky that Van Dyke didn't leave the country.
That's right.
I mean, think about this. They didn't take his passport away from him.
He just posted bail. He might still leave the country.
And, well, and then they'll be out $1 million. But the reality is, he could have left the country, and we never would have. Then it would have been an international manhunt to get him. This is, in a single phrase, I'll just make it brief. It's too little, too late. And I think that this call for a special prosecutor is appropriate. This, if there ever was the need for a special prosecutor, now is the time. And once again, we talk about how we respect good police officers, but good police officers cannot remain silent. I mean, think of what you just said. Here's a kid that was shot, he was on the ground, and 13 of the 16 shots were while he was down, dying on the ground. Right. I mean, that is, and by the way, Van Dyke really should be in prison as we speak.
Yeah. And it having been a year ago, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's been free for what, over a year now?
And being paid to do a desk job.
I believe so.
And the city had paid the family $5 million. They thought they'd swept it under the carpet. Hillary, there were either 8 or 9 other police officers at the scene that we know of for sure because they're in the video. Are those people guilty of a crime? You're an attorney.
Well, I think they very well could be. And what you have, not only that, is you have 5 SUVs that were at the scene as well, all with dash cams, but they're only talking about video from 2 of those 5 SUVs. So you have those issues. And the issue you mentioned before is extremely important as well, but a time sequence is important too. Yeah. What we know is that he was shot at 16 times, but that happened in 14 seconds. Think about that for a minute. 16 shots, 14 seconds. Police officers on the scene, and they talked about him having a knife, but the knife, for those who are listening and watching, the knife is the size of a Swiss Army knife blade, 3 inches. It's the kind of thing we used to use just to have on board to open boxes and whatnot, those kind of things. Not a switchblade, not the kind of knives you think about criminals carrying, but a utility type knife that he happened to have in his pocket and pulled out. Those kind of issues all have to come into place to think about this. So I believe it has to go much further than just this one conviction. We've got to talk about all those others that covered this up for as long as they have, and the evidence that we still need to see.
And let's also keep in mind, and people in Chicago who are watching and know this to be true, this is not new of the Chicago Police Department. What is new is, I'll say it again, like I said in the last segment, videotapes. We have videotape. That's what has exposed what's been going on in our community for a long, long time.
Yeah. Well, it tells you that we need more. It's not enough to have dash cams and not enough to have body cams. We need gun cams, taser cams. Video surveillance needs to be very much in place. We have someone that has both the responsibility as well as the opportunity to even take human life. Accountability must be present.
You know, they actually, I think you might have done this story where they had two officers that went to a nearby fast food place, and 84
stripped the video.
They stripped the video. Now they're claiming they didn't do anything, but nobody can explain how 84 minutes of a tape was deleted that we'll never see what happened before, what happened after.
Right.
And that's, in essence, in my opinion, is tampering with evidence, and they've gotten away with it.
We need the Burger King video. That's what it boils down to.
But you'll never get the deleted tape now. It's gone. One of the things we're doing at SiriusXM, if I can mention, is we're holding what we call American Conversation, where we're bringing in police chiefs, the Attorney General, U.S. Attorney General, and we're having a solution-oriented conversation with policemen, with the New York Police Commissioner, with the Attorney General, with people who work in the system, because I think more than anything, we have to have an honest conversation about police-community relationship.
Yeah, and that's brilliant. That's on your show on SiriusXM.
We'll be doing that sometime early part of this December.
Great, great. And Hillary, do you think, or what are your thoughts on the possibility that this cover-up, for lack of a better word, this 13-month delay, shall we say, may be extended all the way to the mayor's office? And since this shooting happened a month before the election, where the mayor was up for re-election, there might have even been a political component to that. This is a charge that a number of Republicans have made, but it doesn't sound incredible. Your thoughts?
We need a very thorough federal government Justice Department investigation.
Yeah.
There's no question about this. We should not allow it to be sidetracked to just this one police officer and the horrendous thing he did, though we must move very expeditiously to address that concern as well. But we know what we're saying here is quite systematic. When video begins disappearing, when all those dash cams, 3 of the dash cams of the 5 that were on scene knowingly, somehow or another were turned off.
Oh, and none of them had audio. And they said it was because they put the batteries in backwards. Well, wait a minute, you put the batteries in backwards, you don't get video either.
It doesn't work at all.
Well, and let us also be honest. The reality is that the mayor, Chicago, everybody knows that Chicago mayor is a strong mayor government. And you hit it on the head. That was a hotly contested mayoral race. Imagine if that video had appeared on local television in Chicago, how much explaining the mayor would have had to do, what action he would have had to take, what he would have had demanded from his police department. I say to you, it is no doubt in my mind that the mayor instructed the powers to be, do not release that videotape until after this election is over, and they waited 13 months. Justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah. Well, and they didn't just wait 13 months. I mean, they would have waited years beyond that. It was a court order that brought this thing out. It was a lawsuit.
It was a very brave journalist. And remember, there was repeated freedom of information requests that were denied.
Right.
Denied. And eventually, you had to go to, the reporters had to go to court, and a judge had sense enough to say, look, no, this is unconstitutional, release that tape and let the world see what happened.
Yeah, this is a public record. And
it's a public record, absolutely.
People have every right to know what. We have just a little less than a minute left. I'm curious from both of you real quickly, do you see this as everything that's happening right now as a positive move people waking up, people moving forward, or are we sliding back?
I will say quickly, it's a question of whether this is a moment or a movement.
There you go.
Somebody asked, I've always said the difference between a moment and a movement is sacrifice.
Yeah.
People on all sides have got to be prepared to make sacrifice. That's the difference between a moment and a movement. Movements require sacrifice.
Yeah, there you go.
He's right. It's in our hands.
Yeah.
Whether or not this is positive or not is in our hands. If we move forward, as we should completely, with new policies, new training, and more heavily and comprehensive accountability, indeed it can make a big difference. If we fall short of that, and all we deal with is one trial, again, what we've gotten every single time along the way that we indeed did have a trial.
It's just another one.
That's exactly right.
Hillary, Joe, great to have you both with us.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.